Today we're going to make a stuffed toy or soft sculpture, and the theme we've chosen today is Ugly Dolls based on the movie. For this we will need a pattern, and there's a variety of patterns available through Google, or if you're talented enough you can make your own. You'll need some felt. Choosing felt because it's easy to work with, it doesn't fray. We'll need some fabric cutting scissors, and we'll also need some paper cutting scissors. Paper cutting scissors so that it cuts paper and doesn't blunt the felt. We'll need a lead pencil. We'll need a variety, something to mark with. Today I'm going to use a quilter's pencil, but you could also use tailor's chalk. You'll need some pins. You'll need some embroidery floss and a needle. I'm going to use an embroidery needle, but you could also use a chenille needle which has a bigger eye, or a sharps needle. We're also going to need some polyester wadding to stuff it. Here is a selection of toys that I have made that are suitable, and the stitches that we're going to involve today. We're going to learn some running stitch, some blanket stitch, some stem stitch, and some back stitch. The first thing we need to do after we've selected our pattern is to take our paper cutting scissors and cut out our pattern on the line. Once we've cut out our pattern, there are some extra pieces that need to be put on. So we need to use some tracing paper, and we need to trace around those. And then cut them out. Once that preparation is done, we're now ready to do some pinning. So we're going to take our pattern piece and we're going to put it on our felt. When we place it on the felt, it's important to conserve fabric, so we're going to put it as close as possible to the edge. Then we're going to take our pins. We're going to pin the ear. It's important when we're pinning to avoid the pins being too close to the edge, and we go through the paper to the back, across and up. Then using our fabric scissors, we're going to cut out around close to the edge. I keep the scraps in a plastic bag, useful for doing other little projects. Now that's cut out, we can take the pins out. It's important to put your pins back into the pin container, keeping a tidy work area. The next thing we're going to do is to put some markings on our pattern. So we take our pattern piece back again and we use some pins, or you could just freehand it. Put some pins to mark, then using your pencil we draw our line. Then we're ready to pin our features on. Now we're ready to sew. With our embroidery floss, it comes in 6 strands. So we need to, first of all, cut off a piece that's about 45 centimetres long. Avoid having it too long because it can get into knots. If you wanted a nice thick feature, you could use the full 6. But we're going to be conserving, and we're going to split it into 2 lots of 3. If you didn't want quite the emphasis, you could use 2 strands. Then we thread it through the eye of the needle, but we don't tie a knot. We leave it so that we've got about a 10 centimetre tail, and we're ready to go. Start at the back and we do a couple of little stitches on top. Then we come up and then we go forwards. This is a back stitch. Backwards and then forwards. You could also use stem stitch to do this as well. Make the stitches about 1/2 centimetre long and they need to join. When we get to the end, we go to the back and we just do a couple of stitches on top of each other and then we cut it off nice and close. Now to sew on the eye, we're going to use a blanket stitch. We start off with a back stitch again. We come up, we bring our thread up and we wrap it around. We lay our thread at the top, we bring our needle down, up about 1/2 centimetre, wrap it round. Continue all the way round, keeping the stitches nice and even, not pulling them too tight, and trying to keep the same distance, about 1/2 centimetre across and 1/2 centimetre down. Although if you were using a bigger eye, you could use a bigger stitch. When we get back to the start, then take your stitch through and then weave it through and cut it off. It's important that when we're sewing that we leave enough thread at the end to end off. So encourage your students that when they get to about this much thread to go through the back and end it off, even though they may not be near the end. The next feature we're going to put on is a tooth. So we'll got a tooth pinned on. We're going to use white embroidery thread and we're going to use a running stitch. We start off with a couple of stitches on the back, then we bring it up, starting in the corner. You could start at the middle. Finishing off in the same way, a couple of stitches on top of each other, just like we did with the back stitch. We're going to create an eyeball. So to do that, we're going to do a French knot, although you could use a couple of stitches on top of each other. So to do that, we're going to come up from the back, we take our thread and we're going to wrap our needle round about 3 or 4 times and then we're going to pull it through. And we try to avoid having the needle come out of the thread, but sometimes it happens. If you wanted to, you could do another one to create a little more emphasis. So coming up, wrapping our needle, thread around our needle 3 or 4 times, and then bringing it back down. So there's our eyeball. So that's, once we've sewn on our features, we're now ready to pin it together. So we take our right sides together, and when we pin we need to leave room for the stuffing. So I'm going to choose this side here because it's nice and straight. We're going around. I'm not going to leave the ears open because we're going to get the stuffing into those. Then we're ready to sew. To join this together, we're going to use overcasting or a whip stitch. And I'm also going to use 6 strands of thread rather than 3. We're going to work from right to left. So we're going to start here and we're going to work round. What I'm going to do is to bring my needle through, leaving a tail in. the inside. Then I'm going to go over the top of the fabric and along about 1/2 centimetre. Because the stuffing is going to here, our stitches need to be fairly close together. And by using the 6 strands, I'm creating a thickness but also a feature as well. So as the bigger the stitches, the more rustic the look. If you wanted a nice tidy finish like this one, just using a couple of strands and a close colour, and it's not visible. Because these monsters, ugly dolls, have quite a few curves, it's easy to sew the pieces together on the outside rather than putting the right sides together and sewing them and turning them through as you would if you were using a sewing machine. We're nearly to the finish, just doing the last leg, getting ready to stuff it. Been taking the pins out as I've been going and putting them in our pin container. Probably leaving about 7 or 8 centimetres. To finish off, we're going to end it off so that we don't have the threads to tangle while we're stuffing. Just going to do a couple of stitches on top of each other, thread it through, and cut it off. We're using polyester wadding to stuff it. We bought a brand new one, but if you've got an old pillow or cushion and want to recycle the stuffing from that, that would be good. So we're going to take a little bits at a time, and push it in. I'm going to use a spoon to push it up into the ears. You could also use a satay stick if you've got fine joints. The amount of stuffing you put in depends on how flat or how firm you want your ugly doll to be. Fingers are also a good tool to push the stuffing in, firm it out. Now working down into the legs. I haven't put a lot of stuffing in these arms today. Just a little bit more. Now we're ready to close him up. So to do that, just get our seams together, our edges together, a couple of pins just to hold it together and secure it as we're sewing. So we're just running stitches through to where our last stitch. Tail is inside. At this stage, if you wanted to, you could open it back up again and add another little bit of stuffing just to make it a little bit fatter. As we're doing our overcasting, make sure our stitches are going onto the other side. Back to where we started from. So to finish off, do stitches on top of each other. I'm going to take our thread, weave it back through the stitches, about a couple of centimetres, bring it through, out the back, and then we're going to cut it off. And there we have our completed ugly doll.